Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Hello, welcome back, folks. Thank you so much for tuning back into the GSMC Sex Podcast. This is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Ainslie Caswell, and today I am going to cover the very broad topic of toys. Sex toys, of course. Now, we don't have enough time to cover every single type of toy out there, do we? There are even so many big categories within the big category of sex toys. We could spend an entire episode just talking about the category of toys for women, or an entire episode talking about the category of toys for men, toys for couples, toys for same-sex couples, toys for lesbian couples, toys for male couples. It's really infinite. So for this episode, because we could surely revisit the topic of toys in another episode, I've decided to cover 3 specific types of toys and then one special toy at the very end. One specific high-end toy that even I had never heard of is going to be featured at the very end. And I think that's a pretty big feat to have a premium sex toy that even I, a former seller of sex toys, has never heard of. I think that's pretty impressive, but that's just me. So let's jump into it. So the first category that I would like to cover, that personally I think is a no-brainer, but I am the owner of a clitoris, is clitoral stimulators. Now, I would like to think that this factoid is common knowledge by now, but again, I've already been through school and have already had several partners, and there's always people who are coming up in life and are still learning things, but did you know that the clitoris is an organ with more than 8,000 nerve endings? Did you know that? And once in a while, they need some attention. This reminds me that just last night, I was watching the South Park movie. Anyway, the clitoris can be a sometimes missed but very important part of the female sexual anatomy, and because of this, there are many sex toys that are created for the benefit of that geographical area. I would like to emphasize at this time, though, that everyone is different with their preferences for not just clitoral stimulation, but basically any type of physical stimulation. If you are a person who enjoys not just sexual activity, but any kind of touching, you're probably very aware that your preferences can be different than many other people's. The same goes for clitoral stimulation, especially because, as I just pointed out, this part of the body is extremely hypersensitive for most people. And so the preferences for each individual person can vary dramatically. So if you are getting sexual with someone who is the bearer of a clitoris, you may just want to check in with them and their preferences for how they enjoy this area to be stimulated, if they enjoy it at all. So with that being said, There have been many, many toys that have been designed and put out into the retail space so that people can fill this need in their life. Although it may seem that these toys are largely designed for solo use, they're excellent to introduce into couples play, multiple situations, and even traditional intercourse, which, again, can leave the clitoral area sort of neglected. And in more recent years, recent meaning, let's say, the past 10 to 15 years, there have been wearable sex toys introduced onto the market where either the man or the woman can wear a sex toy during intercourse that stimulates the clitoral area. So, now that we've sort of given an overview of the types of things that are out there, we can maybe jump into more specific types of toys that are out there for your clitoris. So, what types of things are out there? There's very ergonomic toys that are out there. What does ergonomic mean? Well, in a literal sense, it means that it is an item that is not your body that conforms to your body. When we're talking about furniture, the word ergonomic comes up because a company is trying to sell you on the fact that their product fits to your body because it's supposed to be more comfortable. You hear this word when we're talking about chairs a lot, and now it comes up with things like sex toys because the company wants you to know that it conforms to your body. An ergonomic sex toy will not only conform to your sex organs, but to your hand, because you're frequently holding it in your hand and then placing it against another part of your body. But I often see a very popular sex toy that is not ergonomic at all, and those are the wands. Raise your hand if you are a die-hard wand user. I personally was not and never was, but when I started selling sex toys, I was briefly a multi-level marketing sex toy seller. I was a part of one of those passion party companies, which there's a lot of bad things to be said about MLM companies, but there are good things to be said about being able to see and feel a sex toy before buying. And they were popular. They were. And I can't tell you how many women are die-hard wand users when it comes to their sex toys. Not just because they enjoy it, but because it was the first thing that they ever picked up when they were teenagers. And the first thing that they asked me is, do you have a wand? And they don't want anything else. And one of the first things that comes up, even if you Google clit stimulators, is a wand. And just for anybody who is kind of in the dark about what I'm talking about, when I say wand stimulator, I'm sort of referencing a classic back massager. This is a long plug-in corded electric massager with a long plastic handle and a bulb at the end of it where there's buttons on the handle. And for decades, women have used these back massagers just as an item to use as an intimate massager. And if this were a history lesson, I would do a deep dive on whether or not this was the real origin of the Adam and Eve stores and things like that, but we don't really have enough time for that. So I'll just keep going with the other categories I was planning on discussing. Some of the more popular categories, especially in recent years, are clitoral suction vibrators. These were not around, even when I was doing in-home sales. Even now, even being around for a couple years, I believe they're still considered sort of luxury items. They're typically in the over $100 range or more. I see them being made by the luxury manufacturers of the toys, the higher-end manufacturers. They're generally very small, so they're still compact, but they're extremely powerful. So that's another reason why they're popular. Other toys that brag about surface area or power or wand toys tend to be larger and they don't travel well or they're not discreet. But that is something that companies are catching on to and the technology is making better. If you want to shop for wand-style toys, there are companies that are making mini wands, portable wands, wands that are shaped like wands but are the size of bullets. Speaking of which, the bullet is in kind of an age-old style toy that is considered a clitoral toy. It's generally not considered a shaft toy. When you look at something that is called a bullet, it's often going to be something that is considered a clitoral stimulator. It's usually not going to be something that is more than 3, maybe 4 inches long at most, and probably not more than 1 to 2 inches in diameter. And those are the types of small clitoral stimulators that women are looking for in terms of discreetness, travel. Off of that, there's also something called a lipstick vibe. And those are vibrators that literally are designed to look like lipsticks. When I was still doing home sales, there were a couple lipstick vibes that were on our sale list, and they were extremely poor quality. I don't know if there's any around that are better quality, because the whole idea is that the vibrator is mostly about the way it looks and not so much about the way it operates. And the whole idea is that it's designed to be tiny. And generally those batteries and those motors are not incredibly sophisticated. So if you get something that is a lipstick vibe, it's probably not going to last you very long, maybe 6 months, depending on how long you use it. It's mostly a novelty item. I feel like it's the kind of thing that you would only get somebody as a bachelorette gift or something like that. Bullets are the kind of thing that people will actually get if they want to use it, but those are also usually cheap and not great quality. And then there's just varying degrees of bullets. You can get a great quality bullet that is upwards of, $60, $70, $90, over $100. And then there's sort of one more category in the clitoral stimulation area, and that's finger wearables. And that's just, I feel like, a different variation of a bullet, where it's a bullet type motor that is on kind of a plastic sleeve for your finger. And it's on sort of a plastic ring that you can then slip on your finger or a couple of your fingers, and you wear it on your hand. Those also seem, in my experience, seem to be very low quality. Very rarely do they tend to have a higher price point, meaning they have a more sophisticated motor on them. Not saying that something has to be pricey to be good quality, but if you can find one that is a solid manufacturer with a decent motor or battery system, that's where you're probably going to get a good longevity, a good life out of it. Something else to look for in some of these toy manufacturers is warranties. Believe it or not, a good amount of these manufacturers now offer warranties. Because just like our computers and just like our phones, they are a tech manufacturer, and they guarantee their stuff just like our other tech. And they believe that their stuff should and will last a certain amount of time. So, not sponsored, not paid to say anything that I'm saying today. That's one of the reasons I'm trying to avoid some name dropping here. But I know from personal experience that Lilo is a brand that will back their stuff for 10 years. And they are based out of China, so there will be some mailing delays if you have to submit a claim. I had to submit a claim because of a motor issue in one of my sale items back when I had one of their toys in my kit. But it took a few months for me to get the item back and forth from wherever their warehouse was, but they got it back to me. So, again, not sponsored, but I still have items from them. They've been going for several years. A lot of the toys nowadays are rechargeable, and that's something that will last you for a long time. They run for several weeks on a single charge, depending on how much you use it. If you're running things for a few hours a day, then maybe not. Maybe not. But what are you doing a few hours a day? But hey, I'm not you. I'm not you. I don't know what you're doing. Many of the toys nowadays, even the rechargeable ones that have charging ports, are also waterproof or water resistant to a certain depth. So you can take them in the bath or shower. Not all of them. Check your details. And on another episode, we should talk about lubricants, because the type of lubricant that you use with your toy and also in the bath or shower is very important. So make sure that you check back in for our episode on lubricants. The only type of clitoral stimulator that I really haven't covered here are things like wearables, meaning things that you can wear on your actual body, like inside your underwear, on your crotch. And there's also a couple of these things that have remote controls. Personally, I found that those types of things are generally not popular, not comfortable, and not always very effective. So they're probably not worth your time or your investment. Generally, the problems that people run into with those types of toys is that they don't stay in place, they're not very powerful, and people don't get the result that they're looking for. It's very exciting to have a wearable vibrator device and think that it's going to somehow control your body for you. A lot of people in their fantasies are looking for a loss of control. And it's extremely exciting to think that you could give that control in the form of a remote to another person, your partner. A lot of people fantasize about, let's say, going to a restaurant and giving a remote control to a thing that's in your panties to your partner sitting across the table from you. Unfortunately, the reality is that those devices don't always do what you want them to do. I think a better thing to do would be to put a little work into maybe having your partner slip off his shoe and put it between your legs while you're at the dinner table. Or wear an easy access outfit to have him touch you, that kind of thing. Or, honestly, use your phones. Use your phones. They're probably much more reliable and will cover far more surface area. To be honest, just clean them afterwards. If I find a toy that has a remote that is reliable and stays in place and works, I will tell you what it is, I promise. Coming up next, let's talk about shaft toys, meaning toys for the shaft.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hey folks, welcome back. Thanks for staying interested. This is Ainslie, of course. And we gave a lot of attention to owners of clitorises in the first segment. And I think we might need to transition to penis owners in this segment. You may or may not be surprised to learn that that doesn't just mean pleasuring the penis. Even I have made the mistake of saying like, oh, this segment is about sleeve toys. It's not just about that. It can be about a lot of different things. So let me try to start with what I would consider the simplest. So I'm going to start with cock rings. So cock rings can actually be a part of a larger toy. Cock rings can be a part of other toys that stimulate other parts of the body, but they can also just be a toy all by themselves. So if we just talk about the cock ring for what it is a ring that is placed at the base of the penis, but can also be stretched around the testicles as well. And the point is to place it there after an erection has already occurred to restrict blood flow to both enhance sensation and create a more lasting erection. I'm sure there are more nuanced experiences that everyone may or may not have, but I'm not a penis owner, so I'm not going to deep dive into that. What I will say is that cock rings are very often attached to other things. Very often, they're very small vibrators that benefit both partners because the vibrator often vibrates the cock that the cock ring is attached to. So what we often like to say is that a vibrating cock ring very often turns your cock into a vibrator. It's kind of funny. And depending on how you position it, if a male is having sex with a female, you can position it so that the female is coming into direct contact with the vibrating portion against her clitoris, which is very often the goal. But I'm not going to speak for everybody, and you don't have to position it that way. You can flip it around very many ways. You can turn it away from that portion of her body if the sensations are too intense. Vibrating cock rings are often very flexible, and you can just turn it off if you don't want it to vibrate. Now, if we're going to start talking about things that the penis can go into, of course we have to start talking about things that are called strokers or sleeves, or you might know it by the term pocket pussy, or something that rhymes with flashlight. Not sponsored. All of these things are very similar, but they all have a lot of distinct differences. Let's talk about one type in particular first. Let's just talk about the very basic, soft, plasticky, let's call them strokers. I used to sell a couple of these when I was doing in-home sales. These are about the size of your hand. They're about 5 to 6 inches long. They look like a pink sea cucumber, and they're very stretchy. They're very soft. They warm up in your hand or any other part of your body, wink, wink. And the purpose is that they mimic female anatomy, that they will warm up to body temperature for obvious reasons, and they're very soft. And if you put your finger in them, or again, a different part of your body, they feel realistic because that's the point. And when you put lubricant in them, again, they are supposed to feel realistic and nice and soft. Some of them are made out of really basic types of plastic, and they will melt extremely easily. Any kind of major heat, they will melt. Do not leave these in your car. Do not put them on top of an old television. Do not try to cook them. I'm serious. If you give them to a teething child, he will be able to take a bite out of it. These things are not safe for children for a multitude of reasons. So, enough of the jokes. These are very, very useful tools for a few different reasons. What can you use them for? They're very often referred to as masturbation sleeves, but they're incredibly useful with multiple partners. First, let's talk about how you can use them during oral. Most importantly, I want to point out that these plastic masturbation sleeves are hollow from one end to the other. You can enter through one end and it's hollow right through to the other end. So, regardless of how long a man is, if you push the sleeve down towards his base, you can generally force him to come out the other side. If you want the sleeve to be shorter, you can just cut it because the plastic is that soft, as we've discussed. So regardless of whether or not you cut the plastic to make the sleeve shorter, during oral, you can make your man come out the other side and use your mouth just on the portion that is coming out of the other side while the sleeve is doing most of the work for you on the base of his shaft. That's a very useful tool during foreplay, and it also helps elongate foreplay to help give the man a good experience during foreplay while conserving the other partner's energy. Now, you can also use the sleeve during intercourse, but usually you do have to choose to cut it. Now, this is typically for partners where the male partner is penetrating the other partner too deeply, and it's uncomfortable for one or both partners. You can use one of these sleeves as a bumper that you place all the way at the base of the male's penis so that it prevents him from penetrating the other partner too deeply. So you take the sleeve, cut it to whatever length you'd like as a base to prevent him from penetrating any more deeply than that, and then place it at the base of his penis, and then you go about intercourse as usual. The base of the sleeve, however long you've made it, will prevent him from going in any deeper than that. There are now formal products on the market that do this, that function as this does, but this is your at-home hack that's been around a little bit longer. And it really is a godsend for partners that are slightly mismatched or can't get things right, or sex has been a little bit painful and you don't know why, or you're just trying to get that much more control. And this is a great solution. These are only so durable, so if you do this, you might need to replace the item every so often, so just be aware of that. Okay, now that I've given you like a masterclass on those soft sleeves, those really soft plastic sleeves, let's talk about my not sponsored flashlight category. This is really where the unofficial term of pocket pussy came from. Pocket pussy really refers to this specific brand, which is really where the term came from. It's because they look like an actual vagina. That's what they look like. That's what they're supposed to be. That's what they're modeled after. Is this the brand that Jenna Jameson gave her mold to? Is that an urban legend? Or is that a... Okay, I'm going to Google it. Oh, no, I'm wrong. It's some girl from the Czech Republic. It's a video. Oh my God. She said, men masturbate to my vagina. Wow, that's okay. I learned something new, and so did you. Good for her. I'm a fan. Okay, so when we're learning about this product, it maybe ironically or not on totally on purpose, it actually looks like a flashlight. Like if you didn't know any better and it fell out of somebody's pocket, you would maybe for a split second think it was a flashlight. And it's not. It's totally not. It comes with a twist-off lid, not only to keep it discreet, but I'm also assuming to keep it clean. But how many users are really going to care about that? You should care about it, to be honest. Has a removable base for greater length or vibe insertion. Oh, yeah, also something that you find occasionally in non-shaft toys. Some of those toys have a space for bullet vibe insertion or removal, so you can make a toy vibrating or non-vibrating. It doesn't actually say what it's made out of. I would have assumed that it was made out of silicone, but it doesn't actually say. So usually, in my experience, if a sex toy doesn't stipulate that it's made out of silicone, it's not. It's made out of some other variation of plastic. That's often just for ease of identifying maintenance and knowing what type of lubricant to use. Again, lubricants are such a convenience and safety topic that we'll cover that in another episode. But I would have expected flashlights to be made out of silicone, but maybe they're not, just for ease of manufacturing. They've been around for a pretty long time. Now, here is the time where I might transition to anal toys, because I feel like that's a pretty logical place to go when we're talking about people who own shafts, because anal stimulation is a pretty normal place to go when you're talking about shaft owners. But anal Stimulation and anal health is such a broad topic that I feel like it deserves more time than just a segment of a segment. So I'm going to just transition to a couple of other shaft toys, if it's okay with you guys. So I'm going to jump into the area of pumps, which, to be honest, I'm very unfamiliar with. So just from a quick spin on a product website, I've deduced that pumps are largely about helping produce and enhance an erection rather than about stimulation. So that's more similar to a cock ring than anything else. I'd love to summarize a couple of reviews about a couple of pumps that are featured on this website. Here's something that someone said about a pump that he gave 4 stars. A lot of men have heard about penis pumps and ask if they actually work. Some are disheartened when they learn the effect isn't permanent, but some are fine with it and want to give it a try. This one comes with a cock ring, lube, and cleaner, which makes it a nice introductory item. Some usually think of the pump as solo use, but I've heard of several couples who make it work as a partner item. A different user gave this same pump 1 star. I am not Mr. Hung by any measure. This device is too small for practical use. Even when sloshing with lube, I had to stuff myself inside. And as soon as any vacuum was generated, I was clamped to the sides of it and could not expand. The effect was so uncomfortable, and the vacuum failed to cause me to become erect. If it had, I don't know if I would have been trapped. I am not boasting about being big, and I am not especially big at all. But the narrow structure and sticky silicone liner made this thing extremely awkward. Here's a different review of a different pump. There's nothing truly dynamic or unique about this pump. Made of relatively body-safe materials and under $30? Great. This works as well as any other pump, helping its user achieve and maintain a longer-lasting, larger, firmer erection. Using the supplied cock ring can prolong the effectiveness. The effects are very temporary. Use the thicker water-based lube to help create a seal and increase the effectiveness of the product. The pump is fairly responsive and provides a good amount of pressure quickly. Try using the included cock ring before pumping for maximum effectiveness and a little lube. I'm sorry. As a non-penis owner, I find all of this very fascinating. I never sold pumps. They weren't really in my repertoire, and I was primarily selling to women. There's another category that is a little bit out of my wheelhouse, and I would also consider them not just specialty items, but they're a little bit more in the, I'd say, lifestyle category rather than specifically sex toys. It's these 2 items that are referred to as strokers and packers. Strokers are items that are shafts that appear to be hollow. The pictures that I'm looking at seem like the space might be a little limited. They might stretch. I'm unsure. But I think the idea is that you, as a shaft owner, can put yourself inside of it and then experience a sensation that's like an extension of your own body. That's one of the actual bullet items that's in the description of the product. It says, feels like extension of your body. It's a latex-free material. It has a ribbed cavity inside. It comes, or at least the product that I'm looking at, it comes in a variety of skin representation colors, but the size all seems to be the same. So if you go to various outlets, I don't know if there's different options there. The second product that I mentioned, called a packer, doesn't seem to be hollow. It just seems to be a shaft item that is for the purpose of placing in the groin area to be worn throughout your day. It does seem to have a recess in it at the very top of it, but the shaft itself doesn't seem to be hollow. Also, the product I'm looking at seems to come in a variety of color representations, but the sizes all seem to be the same. I can't say for what else you might find at different retailers. Oh, I just noticed this. The one that I happen to be looking at, the part of the purpose of it is that it's a stand to pee item with a urethra opening. So obviously part of the purpose of some of these items is people that may or may not be in some sort of transition stage, or to provide options for different people in different circumstances. I will say that if you want to clean these products, that you will want to look into toy cleaner. Toy cleaner is one of those things that you want to have with any intimate product like this, and is very important to preserve these products so that they don't deteriorate sooner than they should or house bacteria that they should not. Toy cleaner is very important. Wow, talking about toys for the shaft really goes into a lot of areas. I bet you didn't think it'd get that complicated, did you? Everyone thinks the penis is so simple. It's really not. So where do we go from here? Let's talk about toys for the vagine. Okay? Vaginal toys are up next.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back again, folks. This is a huge topic we're tackling today, which is sex toys. In the first part, we talked about clitoral stimulators, and I acknowledge I didn't even talk about ones that simulate oral. And in the second section, we talked about shaft toys, meaning ones designed for the shaft. And now we've arrived at the other category of shaft toys, meaning ones that simulate shafts. So I'm going to talk about a lot of toys that are designed for the vaginal area. So you might think that because a lot of these toys are designed to look like penises or are generally designed like a shaft, you might think that they work for the anal area as well. Generally, that is not true. Just be aware that in order to be an anal-safe toy, there needs to be a very clear anchor at the base of the toy. On the human body, it is your skeleton. Your skeleton is unable to enter someone else's anal cavity. And when you insert any other object into the anal cavity, it needs to have a base that cannot go in just for safety. So when we talk about anal toys, which we are technically not doing in this segment, we are going to be very clear that all of them are going to have a safety base. So that's why there is a distinction between vaginal shaft toys and anal toys. So let's continue with the topic. When we talk about shaft toys for vaginal penetration, terminology is so important. And when I talk about toys with anybody, but especially when I was still selling them in home parties, the words dildo and vibrator get used interchangeably all the time, and they get used incorrectly. So I feel like we should talk about that first. It's not a crime to use them interchangeably or incorrectly. It's done all the time, but it's important, I think, to clarify what they really mean, just so we understand what we're really talking about. Let's simplify it. right off the bat. A vibrator vibrates, a dildo does not. It's really as simple as that. If you want to turn it into a square rectangle thing, I guess technically a vibrator can turn into a dildo if you turn it off. But it gets really confusing if you call one toy by both words. So for the purposes of simplicity, I'm going to say that if a toy vibrates at all, it's a vibrator. If a toy does not have vibrating capabilities at all, I'm going to refer to it as a dildo. So those are more or less the definitions that I live by, and there may be some variations out there in the world. With that being said, if you search for dildo, even with a basic Google search, you will end up getting vibrators or the term vibrating dildo. So what dildo ends up meaning in the grander scheme of things is a realistic mold or a realistic artificial penis. You end up seeing molds that have an actual penis head, veins, frenulum, everything that goes along with the anatomy. The plastic is squishy, it's soft to the touch, it's even if it's purple or pink or even double penetrator. These are things that I've never seen before. Yeah, so even if they're completely unrealistic and don't totally abide by the classic terminology, they're if you search for just the word vibrator, you'll end up with things that are accented in stainless steel, look like they came from Sharper Image, look like they came out of the Apple Store. They're very different than things that have the word dildo attached, just stylistically, even than just logistically. The two words do have a different meaning, even if they don't just focus on vibration. So, if we zero in on one of them first, let's start with the word dildo. I've already highlighted some of the details of what's out there in the world in terms of dildos. It really focuses on realism. It departs when it comes to realism of color and size, but not all the time. Dildos focus on realism when it comes to sensation, the texture, the patterns, the veins are there, the ridges are there. It gets unrealistic in terms of size, even when it comes to very small. There are some out there that are very small, and then there are some that are extremely large. And then there's a lot that are very average, because that's what a lot of people are looking for. Colors can range to very unrealistic to very realistic. I am looking at a rainbow striped dildo right now. And then ombre pink and black, solid black, and then actual skin tone black, pink. The aforementioned double penetrator one is still kind of blowing my mind. And they're different sizes too. Like there's two of them on a single base and they're different size. That I've never seen anything like that. The one that I think is really beautiful is the one that looks like glass, but it's not. It's like a crystal purple one. So speaking of glass, there is such a thing as a glass dildo. I used to have one of them in my kit when I sold them. First of all, glass is one of the most sanitary products that you can have in a sex toy. It's typically solid. It's not hollow. And so it's very safe. That type of glass is very difficult to break, and I don't know if it chips very easily, but I mean, I had one in a bag that I traveled with. It never, ever was damaged. Mine was decorated with a design. It was gorgeous and beautiful. Many people wanted it. It was very popular, and you can boil them. They're extremely sanitary, one of the only things that is non-porous and doesn't hold on to bacteria. And you can clean it with anything that doesn't leave a residue. So it's a wonderful thing if you enjoy it. Oh, and it's a great product to use for sensory play because you can heat it up or cool it down and then use it on your body. It's a beautiful product. But I mention it also because it looks beautiful. It is literally beautiful. But if you've ever been a fan of glass art, I don't need to mention it to you. But this purple jelly dildo reminds me of it. And technically, glass dildos are classified as a dildo because they cannot and do not vibrate. Glass dildos would be able to vibrate if you somehow hooked them up to a bullet. The easiest way would probably be if you connected them to some sort of strap-on, which is one of the most popular ways, I believe, to use a dildo. Many dildos come with a type of base. The base is circular, and you can kind of fit this, kind of clip it into this ring that is on the front of a strap-on. The base sometimes doubles as a suction cup, and the suction cup, of course, can be attached to any flat surface, and then the dildo is stuck in place where you want it. And then you can use your imagination. The other thing about dildos is many of them come as attachments to these newfangled machines. I shouldn't say that. These machines have been around for a while, I think. I have no experience with them. I've just heard of people owning them, or I know somebody who knows somebody who's owned them, or seen a video of something. I think they're just smaller and more efficient or cheaper than they used to be. I heard of them being very large and expensive. I think the only thing that's happened in recent years is that they've become smaller and more accessible with technology. Probably more powerful, too. The whole point is that they can independently thrust and manipulate toys without the user needing to touch it or manipulate it themselves, so that they can be available to just experience the experience. The one thing about most sex toys is that it does remove the user from the experience of enjoying themselves, because they are manipulating the toy themselves. So it may seem ridiculous to have a large or involved or expensive machine just for the purpose of giving yourself sexual pleasure, until you factor in that many people have a desire, similar to what we discussed in terms of remote control panties. Many people have a desire to completely and utterly give up control during their sexual experience. And that's what these sex machines are all about. So if a dildo, broadly, is a replica of a penis, what is a vibrator? I said a vibrator was something that vibrates, which is broad. But we were talking about shaft toys. So if we just say that it's a shaft toy that vibrates, that's also pretty broad. So what are shaft toys that vibrate? There are a lot. Hands down, I think many of us would agree, the most popular kind is the rabbit. And that combines two kinds of toys, really. It combines the shaft vibrator, which is inserted into the vaginal canal, and it has an external portion that is a clitoral stimulator. These types of toys are called rabbits because the external portion that stimulates the clitoris was very often designed as a rabbit where the ears were the part that vibrated. As these types of toys got more popular and they were replicated by numerous companies, this portion of the toy became different things like a butterfly or other cute animals that honestly I can't remember. Maybe it was a ladybug. I don't know. Some of this, mostly things with wings, and something that was feminine that made you feel like you were cute. There's so many different variations just within these types of toys also. There's variations within the shaft of these toys, and there's variations within the clitoral stimulators. The biggest thing I noticed within the rabbit toys, I think, is whether or not the clitoral stimulators have one or two little ears. Because in the original and most prevalent version of the rabbit toys, and the whole reason that they're called rabbits, is that the clitoral stimulator has two little ears, because it's a bunny rabbit, and the two little ears extend onto either side of the clitoral hood. And then, I don't know for certain, but I believe it was after the most popular version came onto the market, there started to be alternate versions that only had one stimulator coming out from the base and one little arm instead of two ears. It was just one stimulator that came towards the clitoris. So depending on what level of stimulation you preferred, you could essentially choose if you wanted two little ears to come out and stimulate you on either side of the clitoral area. Essentially, that's indirect stimulation. Or if you wanted one little stimulation arm to come out and give you more direct stimulation. As we discussed earlier, the clitoris is a very sensitive area, and everyone is going to have different levels of preference. Nowadays, if you search for rabbit toys, you can find a lot of different options in this little stimulator that comes out from Rabbit Toys. I've seen one that doesn't have any little arms that extend, but instead has a little pad full of little brushes, almost like a toothbrush. Oh, that must be inspired by people that use their electric toothbrushes. Oh my God, I didn't even think of that. Then, of course, there's variations in the shafts of the rabbit-style vibrator. Originally, at least when I got my first rabbit vibrator when I was in college in the early 2000s, there was virtually no options in what kind of shaft you got with a rabbit-style vibrator. It was straight, it was kind of boring, and there was some sort of excitement over beads that would twirl around at the base that I didn't care about or feel when it was happening. It seemed like more like a design thing that they were including to upcharge me. That's what it seemed like to me. Now you can choose things in the shaft of a rabbit toy like a rotating shaft, a thrusting shaft, a longer shaft versus a shorter curved shaft to hit your G-spot. A shaft that vibrates differently than the rabbit portion, and you can control it in alternate ways. You think I could do that with my early 2000s rabbit? I don't think so. And we're not even talking about luxury vibrators. No. And just to close out this topic, what exactly do I mean when I talk about luxury high-end vibrators or luxury high-end sex toys in general? What exactly do I mean by that? Well, with pretty much anything, not just talking about sex toys here, I have personally found that when people say that things are expensive or when things take a long time, I'm overestimating what people mean. So when someone tells me something is expensive, I think that they mean like $40,000 when they really mean $150,000. So when I say luxury sex toys, I mean things that cost less than $300, but more than $100, $150, just to give you a ballpark. And when we're talking about luxury sex toys, luxury intimate items, we're usually looking at products that are rechargeable, so they don't have batteries that you can remove and replace. They're usually made of silicone, which is more body safe. And those are the two things that make the product a little more expensive. If you invest in products that are in that price point that have those qualities, they're going to last you a very long time. If you buy cheaper products that have batteries that you're replacing all the time and their motor is not as sophisticated and they have materials and plastics that are breaking down faster, they're not going to last you as long and you're going to have to throw them away. And those products are almost always going straight into landfills, just so you know. And they're considered hazardous materials because they're covered in hazardous body fluids. So I would love to give you a resource for where to recycle your sex toys that you don't want anymore, along with that info on that sex toy that I had never, ever heard of. So keep listening, and I'll give you all the details.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, folks. We are still talking about sex toys here at the Sex Podcast, and I'm going to cover a sex toy that I have never, ever heard of. This toy is called the Ainslie. Does not look like anything I have ever seen before, mostly because upon first glance, it seems so large. It almost looks like an ornamental thing for your coffee table, like modern art, and you wouldn't otherwise know what it is. Like it almost looks like a diffuser, something that you would put oil in and smells nice for your home. Most of the ones that you see in the articles and in a quick Google search look like they're off-white or cream colored, so it doesn't come in a lot of the fun colors that a lot of vibrators do. And a lot of the information that comes up on it says that it was banned. One of the headlines on this reads, "This groundbreaking sex toy won a tech award, lost it, and won it back again. Now it's available for pre-order." So just to give you a quick roundup about this toy called the Ainslie, it is a sex toy that was built to mimic human touch, and it was released. I'm a little fuzzy on the release time, but it seems like it was around 2018, 2019, and it was given recognition and some sort of award at the 2019 Consumer Electronics Show, which is referred to as the CES Awards. And it later got revoked because the toy was referred to as being obscene. Although the toy is large, it really doesn't look any different than a typical G-spot and clitoral combination toy, except it's so large it can't be inserted. It doesn't resemble a phallus. It doesn't resemble any sex organ of any kind. To name drop a brand, it kind of looks like a Wee Vibe. And a Wee Vibe is C-shaped so that half of it can be inserted into a woman's vagina and the other half can sit on the outside and sit against the clitoral area. That's sort of what the Ainslie looks like, except the base of it is the large part that kind of takes me by surprise. It's so large that it fits in the entire palm of someone's hand in many of the pictures that is being shown. And the upper portion extends above the base and sits above it. And that itself is also so large that it can be grasped by your other hand. So I'm unsure why this whole thing would have been deemed obscene in the first place, but then, of course, as the headline dictates, it was reevaluated and the award was given back. Before it was reinstated, the founder and CEO of the company that created this item, her name is Laura Haddock, she said, "While there are sex and sexual health products at CES, it seems that CES administration applies these rules differently for companies and products based on the gender of their customers. Men's sexuality is allowed to be explicit with a literal sex robot in the shape of an unrealistically proportioned woman and VR porn in point of pride along the aisle. Female sexuality, on the other hand, is heavily muted, if not outright banned." Apparently, her response sparked a larger debate about the overall gender bias in the tech industry, and the governing body of this institution responded a month or two later saying that they didn't handle the award properly and they gave it back to them. So, personally, I think that's pretty amazing. It looks like Time magazine even included the device in its 2019 Best Inventions of the Year, which not only is amazing for something that was controversial, but it's amazing for something that was a sex toy and something that was a sex toy that was made for females. So you can tell by the dates that I'm reporting on that this occurred some time ago. The dates that it's reporting on saying that pre-orders were available towards the end of 2019 and they would be shipping out early 2020 means that we're already living in a world where this product is available, and it seems that there is a second iteration of this product up already. The price point of the original product was in the high 200s, as is the second version of the product. It looks like it's priced at $290. That definitely falls within my understanding of a full-on luxury product. There's also other products that they make as well. They're all a bit cheaper. So this specific item, the Osei, it looks like the most luxurious thing that they make. Again, it is very unusual and unique looking. It doesn't seem to work for everybody. I'm just going to read a passage from someone who wrote an editorial review on a website. She says, "I only managed to experience the innovative delights of the clitoral stimulator when I used it alone, completely ignoring the G-spot stimulator. Even then, it was finicky, falling into place only fleetingly. Despite 3 separate sessions and several cumulative hours of trying, I could not for the life of me get the Osei to fit in a way that got the two to work in conjunction together as advertised. Whenever I did, contorting my body and forcing the thing to stay in place, the effectiveness of one stimulator always came at the cost of the other." That's unfortunate because the one video that I watched on this product, which is on the creator's website, specifically touts the literal and non-literal flexibility of the product and how everyone's body is different and everyone's needs are different, and how the entire purpose of the product is to try to meet everyone's unique needs. I'm also interested in summarizing some of the details of the company. If you go to lauradiccarlo.com, that is not her name cited in one of the other websites. She must have gotten married because her last name is different, or she must have, for some other reason, changed her surname. So if you go to Laura, it's Lora DiCarlo, DICARLO.com. That appears to be her most current name. LauraDiCarlo.com. She is the creator, CEO, founder of this institution that has created this very, very different piece of technology. Her details say, Laura DiCarlo started in 2017. Our premier device was inspired by the experience and persistence of our founder and CEO, Laura Haddock DiCarlo, there's that name that I referenced earlier, and developed in partnership with Oregon State University's Robotics and Engineering Lab. Things got really hot when we won a coveted Robotics Innovation Award from the Consumer Technology Association. When the award was rescinded, it kickstarted a critical public conversation about gender equity in tech and the right to pleasure for all people. Ever since, we've continued working to change censored and archaic ways of thinking across industries, categories, and the media. To reach our goals, we've brought together a passionate group of people with diverse perspectives in design, engineering, and inclusivity. And ultimately, we've created more than a company, we've created a rallying cry. Setting out on a mission to destigmatize sexuality is no small feat, and we couldn't be prouder to have actress, model, and activist Cara Delevingne to join Laura DiCarlo as a co-owner and creative advisor. Ooh, I love Cara Delevingne. Who doesn't? That's not on her website. That's just me, Ainslie, saying that. Together, Laura and Cara are committed to lessening the orgasm gap and driving towards a world where all humans can embrace their sexuality with positivity and confidence. Okay, can you really argue with that? Just as a core belief, can you really argue with that? Orgasms for everybody. As a final statement on her website, our products are engineered to be inclusive, user-friendly, and most importantly, mind-blowing. They combine innovative technology with the beautiful design to delight you in the moment and inspire you to keep exploring your sexual well-being. It's very interesting to read that as a summary on the website and then bounce back to this very detailed review of the Osei. I'm going to continue with a section that she labeled the innovation problem. She says, I just don't know who the OSE was made for. Certainly, it's not for beginners, thanks to its astronomical price point, intimidating size, complicated functionality, humiliating learning curve, and requirement of extensive knowledge of anatomy. I'm also not entirely sure it's good for sex toy aficionados either, who have probably already figured out much more reliable and easier methods of achieving a blended orgasm by using two different toys at the same time. Okay, in all of this time that I've been attempting to describe the OSE and what it is and its purposes, I can't believe I haven't more specifically touched on what its goal is. Essentially, the goal of the toy is to give a woman a blended orgasm, and to clearly define that, it is essentially to give you both a clitoral and a G-spot orgasm simultaneously, or at least right on top of each other. If you don't know what that is, this is likely a topic for a different time, but there's an idea out there, I don't know if there's definitive proof, that women can orgasm in at least two ways, clitoral stimulation and G-spot stimulation. So, not to get into that too deeply, but you can potentially have those orgasms together and separately. And this toy, it's not the first of its kind, it aims to do both. To continue with this woman's analysis of how sometimes this is problematic and this toy is a little advanced, she goes on to describe, as a concept, there's an argument to be made that the hands-free functionality makes it more usable for people with certain disabilities. But I left my attempts at finding my fit with horrible cramps, not only in my hands, but even in my legs. You could also argue that making a customizable rather than one-size-fits-all device is more inclusive to a wider variety of bodies. But it actually feels like the OSE replaced the standard one-size-fits-all solution with a unique no-size-fits-anyone problem. Ugh, that's harsh. But I get what she's trying to say, having never used the device, so I can't identify. I feel like I've experienced devices like this, not just with intimate toys, but have you ever used a product where you're like, who is this for? Oh my God, like who conceived of this thing and who is it for? Especially as a petite woman or like a woman with certain features on my body that are petite, you frequently run into either technology or clothing that never works for you. And you're like, who the F is this thing for that I'm using? And why is it on the market? So it sounds like that's kind of what she's getting at. And I especially understand why she might be saying that, because this toy that she's actually talking about looks unusually large. And just passively observing photos of it, I literally cannot conceive of how it's used. Like, there's no simple explanation for how, like, it's not self-explanatory is basically what I'm getting at. Like, looking at a photo of it, it's not self-explanatory about how you use it. So I understand everything that she's saying about it not being simple for beginners, and it doesn't seem user-friendly enough to be functional even for advanced users, what she means by aficionados. So that all seems to track. Considering that there's a second iteration of the toy on the market at this time, I would hope that there have been improvements made. With that all being considered, no product, especially intimate products, is going to work for everybody, for the simple fact that, as we well know and we've already discussed, every single person with a body is going to be dramatically different. That's the nature of being human. So when you make products like this, there's going to be a certain percentage of people it just doesn't work for. That's just true of everything. And I don't know, that's just going to be the way it is. The good news is that the creator and the company's intentions and their statements and their heart seems to be in the right place. They're making things by women, for the purposes of inclusiveness and equity, and they're working with Cara Delevingne. I respect all of those things. Hey, folks, thank you so much for listening to this GSMC Sex podcast about sex toys. This podcast was brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Don't forget to subscribe to this show wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review. And don't forget to sign up for notifications. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the socials. You can search for GSMC or Ainslie Caswell. Thanks for sticking around. Oh, I said I would tell you how to recycle your sex toys, right? Go to your browser and type in recycleyoursextoy.com. And it gives you one option for the UK and one for the US. It's as simple as that. Join me next time, and I'll see you then.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.